Fake intelligence in George Orwell's 1984. Who was George Orwell? Can tell you who he wasn't. He wasn't the child of the working class. He was not the son of a farmer, a plumber, nor the son of a laundress, seamstress, or waitress. Who was he? Well, um, I will share some visuals today. I will be reading from a carefully prepared script. Someone has criticized me for needing notes, but I dare say my notes ensure that I deliver high quality information, coherent and concise. Um, so far, I believe I've managed that. Today, since this is not about me, we don't need to see me. I will share the visuals provided by a scholar, I suppose, working for some outfit named Great Books Explained. This is his video lecture on George Orwell. I won't play the audio. It'll just be visuals while I read my notes. It's a carefully prepared script, really. And if the visuals are distracting, just ignore them, of course. I think they're quite amusing. It's prepared by one of many, one of George Orwell's many admirers. It seems like I am in the minority. That's an understatement of people ready to, willing to, and able to criticize George Orwell's works. So with that, let's begin. George Orwell is commonly praised as a genius, a prophet, and a defender of the working class. Why? Because that is what we are taught to believe, and most scholars can't see through his lies and detect his fake intelligence. Many people consider Orwell's novel 1984 the 20th century's most important novel. Why? Because their English teachers and professors of literature lacked critical thinking skills. It's a real pandemic in our universities. So, the thankless demolition job belongs to me. Let's begin. Orwell's 1984 is widely characterized as a warning about a dystopian future in which we will be ruled by a greedy, lying, technocratic government. Well, I have news for George. We've always been ruled by such a government. The technology has changed, of course, but it's hardly a prophecy. More importantly, somehow, George Orwell neglected to warn us about fake democracy, legalized banking fraud, fake wars, fake pandemics, deadly foods and medicines, the miseducation complex, unsustainable agriculture, and future droughts. Essentially, he warned us about nothing except his fictional, totalitarian, technocratic, communitarian world in which almost everyone is voluntarily working for the enemy, our totalitarian government, just as his father, and his wife did. His father worked for the Opium Quality Control Department or Ministry. and his wife was actually employed in the censorship department of the Ministry of Information in London during World War II. He was employed in, I don't know, various jobs overseas in India, Indonesia. Well, are you suspicious yet? Is this the man we can trust to write the truth about our reality, about governments? It's dubious. But let me substantiate my suspicions. George claimed that any pub in a mining town would have more intelligence than the Prime Minister's cabinet and Oxford's high table. Statements of that sort are calculated to appeal to the working class. But it's really just schoolyard slander. What criteria did he use to evaluate the intelligence of the working class and the political class? Did he ever give us a clear definition of intelligence? No. Why? The only intelligence he knew was military intelligence. Yeah, and mind control, psyop intelligence. Instead of giving us real intelligence, he used his protagonist in 1984, the man named Winston Smith, to create the illusion that intelligence exists in the written works of Shakespeare, Milton, Swift, Byron, and Dickens. I've written extensively on a few of them, maybe all of them, in my very large volume, Lucifer's Library. And I can tell you, well, without hesitation, I am confident that wisdom does not exist in any of said author's works. I found not even the smallest scrap of wisdom in Shakespeare. Teachers are fond of saying that Shakespeare's play Macbeth is a moral tale warning us against greed. That is a lie. It merely warns against killing kings, committing treason. Nowhere does Shakespeare denounce kings for taking from the poor. He never condemns institutional class-based greed. King Lear might have a twinge of regret about the poor, but that happens while after Shakespeare has already portrayed him as a madman and an idiot for sharing his wealth and power with his three daughters. Orwell did not illustrate unorthodox thinking and living in any of his books. His idiot, Winston Smith, utters nothing better than, "Down with Big Brother." This is not evidence of intelligence or thinking. I prefer that word. It is the basest form of reactionary rebelliousness. Winston does not articulate why he wants a world without Big Brother, and he has not thought about the fact that his world is Big Brother's creation, so he never wonders what he would do without Big Brother. He would have no job at the Ministry of Truth without Big Brother, so how would he pay his bills? It's just plain stupid to rebel without a plan to survive without the existing government. Um, and it's not clear that Winston Smith, well, it's obvious that he wouldn't know how to create an alternative social structure. In 1984, Orwell portrays an extramarital affair as an act of political subversion. That's how he insulted us. How many readers and fans believe extramarital affairs are politically subversive? Yes, in 1984, the government prohibits adultery. But, well, that's a prophecy that didn't come true, and it is ridiculous. But Orwell's bootlickers dare not speak about this obvious absurdity. Now we have millions of people who think by choosing non-heterosexual orientations, they rebel against oppressive norms, even against Western civilization. Yes, their rulers are amused. 1984 presents a world in which news articles and history are constantly rewritten to suit the government. This implies that originally news and history are true, but that is not an accurate depiction of our reality. History and the news don't need to be rewritten because they are always lies. Some facts may be mentioned in news articles, but only minor facts, and without any connection to the complex reality in which all facts exist. Therefore, those articles with small truths, still function to keep us ignorant. Did George Orwell actually fight in the Spanish Civil War? Or is that a lie too? Wouldn't that be ironic? Officially, he spent over 100 days on the Aragon front, experiencing intense cold, boredom, and poor equipment. But in May 1937, he became a hero. He was shot in the throat by a sniper and narrowly, barely survived. Really? Is that plausible? Can a man survive being shot through the throat? I can't find any photographic evidence of a wound, hospital treatment, or a scar. I think Byron played the same card some 60, 70 years earlier when he claimed to um, fight for Greek independence from the Ottoman Empire. Nonsense. These rich boys don't go risking their lives in fake wars. Does that make any sense? You know what I mean. Regarding Orwell's predictions for the future, none of them are being fulfilled, none except for his prediction that technology would be used to surveil and control us. He knew it would come true because he knew most people would accept it as they were already accepting similar technologies in his time. And well, of course, it's predictable because most people love technology. Most people trust their government. And most people don't know how to live outside the surveillance net on the land. Exactly which predictions did not come true? Clocks do not have a 13th hour. War is not waged between three mega regions. London is not Airstrip 1. People are not routinely disappeared. Wait, oops. Well, that started long ago, the disappearing acts. But mostly it's members of the ruling gang who disappear themselves with fake assassinations or behind doubles so they can enjoy their lives outside the public eye, away from the theater. But George didn't talk about that. He offered no insights into who Big Brother really is and how they seized power. He didn't even want us to know that the entire world has been ruled by the same cannibal cult and human farmers for a few centuries. In the appendix to 1984, Orwell claimed countless other words such as honor, justice, morality, internationalism, democracy, science, and religion had simply ceased to exist, disappeared. Really, now, nearly 80 years after he wrote 1984, and more than 40 years after the year 1984, those words still exist. In fact, words are not disappearing. On the contrary, more words are being added. and the meanings of important words are being corrupted instead. Now, anarchy means chaos and violence, according to the media, and during COVID-19, the WHO changed the meaning of pandemic so that it suits, or it now means what epidemic or something even less severe than an epidemic qualifies as a pandemic. Orwell predicted that future governments would regulate and restrict sexual activities. I quote, "Sex crime covered all sexual misdeeds, whatever. It covered fornication, adultery, homosexuality, and other perversions." This prediction is wrong. In fact, our governments are actively promoting non-heterosexual behaviors and even gender modification treatments. What about doublethink? This is the act of holding contradictory opinions or beliefs without awareness of the contradiction. Orwell wanted us to consider this a fundamental problem or symptom of the government-controlled mind. Did he illustrate it well? I don't believe he gave any relevant examples of doublethink. Yes, Winston Smith both hated and loved Julia, but there we are back to sex, the domestic front, which is not a useful example of how our world is founded on contradictory beliefs. He did not expose, for example, the double thinking involved in democracy. I mean, democracy assumes that voters are good and smart enough to identify good and smart political candidates. But those same voters are not good and smart enough to live without governments. The religious mind presents another example of doublethink. Religious people live in a very profound state of contradiction because they believe they are immortal and will go to heaven, but they often act as if they are afraid to die. This prediction also failed. I quote, "From the foregoing account, it will be seen that in newspeak, the expression of unorthodox opinions above a very low level was well nigh, nearly, impossible. It was, of course, possible to utter heresies of a very crude kind, like down with Big Brother. It would have been possible, for example, to say Big Brother is ungood, but this statement, which to an orthodox ear merely conveyed a self-evident absurdity, could not have been sustained by a reasoned argument, because the necessary words were not available." Unquote. Well, the truth is that linguistic limits do not prevent people from thinking critically about anything. They might lack the words, but even if given the words, it's mental limits that prevent people from thinking critically. Simply giving people words like anarchy does not help them become anarchists. Ditto for atheism, mortalism, polyamory, and so on. The ability to question any norm requires mental fitness. Without that, words only lead to idiocy. I know plenty of people with better vocabularies than myself, but somehow lack critical thinking skills. In fact, the entire premise of 1984 is deceptive. Its foundational premise is that we should worry about the future. That implies that the present isn't or wasn't worrisome. Of course, life in 1948 England was rife with injustice, perhaps just as much as it is today. But Orwell didn't want to bring attention to that. Nope. In fact, allegedly, he fought to prevent injustice in Spain, and he went to Paris, the world's leading party city, so that he could live in severe poverty and understand the working class. And he reputedly did the same in London. This is pure fairy tale stuff, nothing more. Orwell's protagonist, Winston Smith, experiences severe poverty, but the narrator expresses no empathy. It's just a matter of fact. Winston Smith suspects that progress is a myth, which it is. But did Orwell develop this theme? He did indeed, but he did not challenge the false premise on which the myth of progress is founded. He did not expose our belief in freedom and material wealth as corruptions of true freedom, and real material wealth. What are real freedom and real wealth? I believe I explained that in my lecture, Free Energy, Free Matter. It's certainly not what Winston Smith imagines. Um, and he doesn't imagine much, really. So there's not much to say about that because George Orwell didn't want to explore the difference between false wealth and real wealth, real freedom and fake freedom. We will always, I mean, the topic of freedom is so um, perfect for mockery. It's it is quite ridiculous to think we could be free, meaning free from all demands, commands, requirements. Human nature itself has, human bodies themselves have demands. Nature has demands. We could argue that in 1984, that 1984 is a warning against communitarianism because in its world, people spy on each other for the government and do so because they believe the values given to them by the government, believe those values are good for society, aka the community. But that warning is not helpful. It's not helpful to tell us that people will spy on each other in the future as if they didn't already in the past. You know, governments don't just spy on foreign nations, they spy primarily on their own people because the people are their true enemy. And by governments, I mean the people, not, the bureaucrats, the common people who push paper in offices. No, I mean the people who control governments. So it's not helpful to be told that the future will suck. The future will be dystopic. I mean, the present was already dystopic. The past was already dystopic. So I could say a drowning man does not benefit from being told he's drowning, nor do swimmers in deep water benefit. Sorry, nor do non-swimmers in deep water benefit from being told they will drown. Why didn't Orwell provide revolutionary solutions, a blueprint for a better world? He didn't because he does not care about us. Did not. Goldstein is the supposedly intellectual rebel in 1984. But it's another piece of fakery. Goldstein, the Jew, Yes, many people believe Jews are our primary enemies, um, or Jesuits. I've done a little lecture on that, or maybe Freemasons and Satanists. Well, the truth is probably that they're all the same people wearing different masks. In any case, Goldstein's manifesto is useless to us. No one reads 1984 because it contains a useful manifesto for creating a better world. Orwell was a self-proclaimed democratic socialist. Guess that means he believed in democracy. Somehow he saw no problem with the fact that England retained a monarchy and was partly controlled by the House of Lords. Lords, you understand, do not represent the demos, the working class. Of course, Orwell knew that democracy is a joke. He knew it's controlled by oligarchs, and he knew democracy is useless while people don't have wisdom or true freedom, and that people will do any job to survive while they are desperate to live in the system created for them. They can be manipulated in any direction, virtually. He also surely knew that socialism is highly corruptible because people can be persuaded to believe almost anything. For example, that invisible things called viruses cause disease and CO2 causes climate change, and therefore to be responsible citizens, um, community members, you must do what ignorant scientists tell you to do. Another valid criticism concerns Orwell's portrayal of nature in his novels. None of them communicate. One moment, let's have a look at my visuals. Have, have a second go through that. Or maybe it's a different one. Why not something completely different? Mm, yeah, interesting stuff. Back in England, Windsor Castle, St. George Chapel, but as I say, please ignore it. I will probably touch on that later. As I was saying, socialism is highly corruptible because people can be persuaded to believe almost anything. Another valid criticism concerns Orwell's portrayal of nature in his novels. None of those novels communicate the slightest love for nature. Nature hardly exists in 1984, and Winston Smith is not even aware of its absence. Furthermore, the narrator expresses no concern about nature's absence because Orwell was not interested in nature and would never voice my belief that we should serve nature, not governments and corporations. Finally, perhaps my most devastating criticism is this. 1984 is just one more dystopian novel calculated to make us feel depressed, hopeless, and helpless. That intention should be self-evident now, even without mentioning that the novel's hero is an anti-hero who accomplishes nothing, is perfectly helpless, and ultimately learns to love his enemy. Please share this lecture with anyone who is still under Orwell's spell.